Welcome to the June session of the Document Excellence Group. I am Richard MacDougall. I work at Cleary Gottlieb as an engineer, and I am the secretary of the Document Excellence Group. Today I'm joined by Reanna Martinez, Manager of Innovation and Systems and Data at Munger, Heather Morrow, Director of Project Management and Training at Loeb, and me, I've already said who I am. We're going to have a three-part session here, hopefully with plenty of time for questions and lively conversation at the end. We're going to start with a case study by Reanna. Then Heather will give us a short presentation about her experimenting with Copilot, and I will do a brief but hopefully interesting and engaging presentation of using Copilot. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Oh, no. I'm just going to hand it over to Reanna.
Hi, thanks, Richard. So as Richard mentioned, I'm the Manager of Innovation Systems and Data at Munger, Olson, and I have the privilege of being able to assess all the new solutions that of course, we've been focused on AI for quite some time now. We were actually early adopters of Copilot. So back when there was the 300 license limit, we jumped right on that bandwagon. So we have a lot of Copilot licenses. We are utilizing it fairly well, but now they've dropped that to just individual licenses. So you can purchase just as many as you need. So that was convenient, but not quite at the right time for us. I'm sure a lot of you already know a lot about Copilot, but just in case, Copilot is embedded into the Office 365 apps, and we'll talk about some of the features that it does in each of the apps. And it's a business productivity tool. Richard, if you want to move to the next slide.
Oh.
This is just a little bit about Copilot. So of course there is the Copilot for the web where you're searching the internet, but the licensed Copilot is embedded into your Office 365 environment. It can crawl over all of your Microsoft repositories and documents and applications and things. It is secure. It is expensive, yes. It does not send any of your queries out into the internet world. So in that way, you can ask it some more sensitive things, but of course you want to follow your firm's policies and whatever you're putting into the app. And we can move to the next slide and we'll talk a little bit about what it does in each of the tools. I think email management is one of the biggest ones, at least in my use case. It can help with drafting some messages. It can also help with if you have a long email chain and you don't want to read every entry of the email chain, it can give you a summary. It's actually pretty good at both of those things. Document creation is another really strong area for it. If you have some bullet points that you want to give the system to get you started, it will generate content for you. And I think it's a huge time saver. We've all been in the scenario where we're staring at a blank page and you just don't know where to start. Getting started is often the hardest part. So this does give you a draft that you can then go back and edit and put into your own words. It doesn't always get everything perfect. So, you do want your own eyes on it and do some curation, but it gives you a great start. It's really helpful. If you are heavy Excel users, there's some tools in there that it can help time save if you're doing a lot of pivot tables, charts, data analysis, formulas. You can use natural language to ask it to do some things, and it will take your data and produce some charts and do some other fun things for you. I'm not a super heavy Excel user, so there are some functions that I'm always going back to Google. Oh, how do I do that again? But now you can just ask Copilot and it'll help you out. PowerPoint presentation is another great one. Another one that just gets you started. It will generate images. It will take data from your spreadsheet or from your Word document and summarize that into slides. It'll give you formatting suggestions. It will rewrite your content. It's just like a little assistant. It's really great. Teams might be the most effective one, at least the one that we find the most value in and we're constantly using. If you enable transcription or recording on your Teams meetings, it's going to give you a summary of your meeting. You can ask it for action items. This is great. I use it all the time to do recaps of our meetings, and I ask Copilot, summarize the meeting and give me those action items. It gives me a format, plop that into an email for all of the participants, and there you have a meeting summary. It's also great to summarize what's already gone on in the meeting. So if you jumped into a meeting late and you don't want to be the person that's asking questions that have already been asked and answered, Copilot will tell you what's been talked about up until that point. If you missed something or if you didn't quite hear someone, you can ask questions during the meeting and Copilot will respond from whatever was being said. So find that might be the most active use case of how our users are using this. And then there's some extra ones. If you're a OneNote user like I am, it has a really great search functionality. It understands acronyms. It's not just returning the data point that you're looking for, which it does. It will show you exactly what it's referencing, but you can ask it questions about your information in there, and it will give you answers that might not necessarily be in your text, but it will understand the context and summarize and give you some content feedback. So that's been really great. And search in general, it's really built on this natural language search platform. So searching across your environment, finding documentation, finding information. It's a really great enterprise search tool. Of course, it has to, whatever you're searching for has to live within your Microsoft environment. So there is a limitation if you have data in other places. Maybe your DMS is not in Microsoft, which most people is not. It does have some limitations there. If you guys are doing anything with automation, it does work with Power Automate. Power Automate can get complicated really fast, but you can ask Copilot to start an automation for you. Tell it what you want to do, and it will put the steps together. Again, it doesn't always get it right the first time. You might need to tweak it and do some testing, but it helps you get an idea. I've used this in some cases where I'm stuck and I'm not sure how to address the problem, and it will give me some things to work with. It's not always right, but it gives me an idea of what I should be focusing on. And it's also really good at language translation. So if you're working with a lot of different languages, it'll help you out with those translations and even in a vernacular sense. Let's go to our next slide. So this is the example or the roadmap of what our rollout looked like at Munger, Olson, and Olson. So we already have a pretty mature vendor assessment process, looking at any tool that's going to be implemented and released into our environment. Copilot and AI tools haven't really changed that much. They've just introduced a few additional questions that we want to ask. But you should always be pretty thorough in your vetting of any kind of technology that has access to your data and that your users are going to be using. So this should be familiar with any folks that do your vendor assessments. You're going to start with just understanding what the tool is, identifying use cases of how it's going to be used and what value we're going to get out of it, and then do the actual technology and security assessment. So some of the security questions that we like to ask for AI tools is, where is this data going? If we put a question into that prompt area, where does it go? Does it stay within our environment? Does it go out to the internet? Is anyone else able to retrieve not only the results of our question, but the question itself? In Copilot's case, they say that it's within your environment, so do your due diligence if you trust that. We have guidelines of Copilot has both the Copilot for the web and Copilot for your internal environment. We can ask whatever we want to our internal environment. Of course, we don't ask anything client related or anything sensitive for that external area. We also like to ask, what kind of administration tools does it have? Is it an enterprise tool? Do we have admin rights to be able to see what's going on with our users and with the tool itself? And Microsoft does a good job of having some administrative capabilities. You can see how there are tools to see how the users are using Copilot, which tools they're using it in, how often, what kinds of prompts, and you can even put alerts around prompt information. Maybe there are things that in your policy you don't want to put into the tool. You can flag those things and get alerts on the security side. It gives you good metrics about usage, so that'll lead into our, what are our KPIs that might help you understanding the value that users are getting out of the tool. Then we move into developing your implementation plan. So what does your timeline look like? What does your user groups look like? I don't know if any of the folks on here are on the technical side, but Copilot does require a change from whatever, there's channel updates, and you have to be on the monthly channel update. And I know that was a sticking point for some organizations, that they don't like to do updates that frequently. And unfortunately, if you want Copilot, you have to be on the monthly channel update program. After you've developed your implementation plan, what is your governance strategy? So because Copilot is in your Microsoft environment, it can crawl all of your Microsoft locations. So you want to take a good look at your SharePoint sites, your OneDrives, make sure that you have some data retention policies, that you're getting rid of old data that you don't need anymore, that the data that you have is secured properly, because there is no more security by obscurity with these AI tools. If you put something in the prompt, it's going to crawl over everything that you have access to and return something. And it might return something that you didn't even know existed, you didn't know that you had access to, and maybe you're not supposed to have access to. So there is some modeling that you can do on the administrative side to see what kind of results it's going to pull back. So your security team, your IT team should spend a lot of time there really understanding the security of your entire environment. We had a good security posture to begin with. We kind of do we don't start out with everything fully open. When we create a SharePoint site, for instance, we only give access to the folks or the groups that will need access. So we were in a good place. Now, that being said, we are working on implementing purview and data classification and data labeling to lock that down a little bit more. I think people get stuck here trying to, they say the good is the enemy of the great or something like that. They get stuck trying to make sure that everything is perfectly secure before we roll it out, before we can move on. I think you need to spend some time here, but this is going to be an ongoing iterative process. There will not be a perfect, there will not be a set it and forget it. This is something that you're going to come back to continuously. So as we are improving our security and our data governance with our purview tools, we're already allowing folks to use Copilot. So I think The initial assessment is just make sure that the really sensitive stuff is locked down, and maybe in your pilot testing, make sure you have some groups that you trust and who will flag things and say, hey, I had access to this that I wasn't supposed to have access to. But I don't think this should be a roadblock. I mean, this is just my opinion now, but don't let this get too overwhelming to prevent you from moving forward with the tool. So then we move into pilot testing, and we're going to select our pilot groups and get feedback from their interaction with the tool. And this was a really important stage. Tools like this, not just like this, any technology tool, right? If the users don't like it, it's going to die on the vine. So you want to select some groups that are a little bit technical, have some tech savviness to them, and are excited about it. People that you know are going to use the tool, who are going to figure things out, who are going to give you feedback. I've seen a lot of pilots that fail because they're just not interested in actually diving into the tool. So you really want people that are going to do the work, who are excited, and then they become your evangelists of the new tool. It's a lot easier when your colleagues are talking about something and they're getting excited about it and saying, look at all the fun things that I can do, rather than your IT team saying, hey, go use this tool, you're required, or we think this is great. But so having that excitement generated from your pilot team is going to really help the adoption of the tool. Of course, you want to get that feedback, develop some training. Our next one is training and support. Whatever feedback you get should be incorporated into your training and your materials, because if they had questions about it, other users are going to have questions about it. Training and support is a really big area. Spend some time here as well. Get some dedicated resources going. Maybe even what we like to do is send out a tip of the week, and that can be a new feature that you can do with Copilot, something that's going to make people's lives easier. We also do some open workshops. This week we're going to talk about this thing in Copilot, and anybody can come and join. So get some training going. The training actually is one of the most important things for adoption. They make these AI tools really easy to operate. They're easy to interact with, but that doesn't mean that your users are going to be the most successful if they don't know what they're doing. So you need to communicate to them the strengths and the weaknesses of the tool, some ideas of what are the things that the tool is really good at doing. It's really good at summarizing. It's really good at giving you a draft document. It's not good at legal specific stuff. It's not trained to be a lawyer. I don't know why I keep getting muted. It's not trained to be a legal specific tool. So we've had some of our lawyers in our pilot test go, oh, I was trying to do X, Y, and Z brief and it didn't do it. Well, it doesn't know what that means. You can't prompt it to say you are a practicing attorney, and then that gives it the ability to be an attorney. So let it know let your team know what it's good at and what it's not good at. Communication, the last few are just project stuff. Get that exciting material out there, get people excited about it, get people on board. The full-scale implementation, what we did, because we already had licenses, after our pilot testing, we rolled it out to all of our attorneys, we rolled it out to all of our management, and then we let our management elect their direct reports. If they thought the tool would be valuable for their role, we allowed them to elect their team into it. I think having the hand raise strategy, I want to be involved, is a really good way to go to get that support and that excitement around it. And then, of course, you want to evaluate. AI tools are difficult to evaluate in terms of your ROI. So think about what kind of metrics make sense. For us, the, time saving is a thing, but it's hard to evaluate time saving. But sometimes metrics is just satisfaction. Sometimes it's like, I really enjoy this, or this is really easy, or this made my job better, or I'm excited to use the tool. That level of satisfaction is also a metric. So even just those fuzzy, non-quantifiable types of metrics are a way to evaluate the success. And of course, the Microsoft does have those reporting tools, so you can see actual usage and data behind that. I think that was it. There were a couple questions I'll try and answer in the chat, but feel free to reach out as well, and I'll hand it out over to Heather.
And thank you, Reanna. And those of you who have questions later on, we will stay on to answer some questions. Hopefully we'll have time between my live demo and the end of the session. So Heather?
Thanks. You want to go ahead to the next slide? So one back. We'll talk real quick. Just go one back. Sorry. So there's a slide in between. There we go. So one of the things I have learned about learning is that if you can make learning fun and enjoyable, you tend to learn faster. And so when I started learning about AI tools, I started just playing. So I started with, the kind of the consumer grade, putting in personal things, not anything related to the law firm or the business or anything like that. Just having a little bit of fun with it. We do have Copilot enabled in Edge in our system. We do have guidelines. We're not supposed to put anything legal up in there. So I'm like, okay, well, I can play with this. I can start learning how it works. I'm taking sessions. I'm learning like what Reanna has done with her firm. But until I start putting my hands on it, I'm not going to learn it. So these are just some examples of where I started just playing a little bit. I can also do these at home. So check with if you have your Office 365 license on your home PC. It might be something you can try at home also to get familiar with Copilot. I think waiting until the firm has implemented everything to start learning doesn't always work the best because you're scrambling to figure out what it can do and what it can't do. Richard, you can go ahead and move on to the next slide. So in Copilot in Microsoft Edge, I put in the prompt, learn more about Copilot. And this is the response I got. And you can see it's very similar to, did I get muted? Okay. It's very similar to what was presented in Reanna's presentation about the things you could do in Word and PowerPoint, Excel. So it's kind of interesting because I did this before Reanna joined us. I'm like, hey, I got the same slide just by typing. So that was the first one I did. And I love that you can actually learn more about different things. So it doesn't have to be, you can put it for learning. And I think this is really exciting for trainers as we move forward with this, is that we can actually teach our users once we implement it to actually learn about signature blocks in a prompt, and it will pull back all of your documents on your intranet on how to do a signature block, right? It's just a little bit different than regular searching. Obviously, in our SharePoint environment, you can put Outlook signature in that search dialog and you'll get back all the tips, but it doesn't summarize it, right? You still have to go and click on all the tips. Whereas with Copilot, it brings back the information in kind of the summary format. It makes it a little bit more digestible, and they don't have to click to, kind of go in and learn about that tip. So continuing with my fun here, let's go ahead to the next slide. My next prompt was to write some funny out-of-office responses while I'm on vacation. And I am going on vacation at the end of this week, so this was fun for me to try to come up with some cute out of office. I don't know that I'll use any of them, but I do find them amusing. So on the first part of this slide on the left-hand side was where I asked the prompt, and it came back with a couple, but it also then gave me a prompt at the end. Do you want more? And so I clicked the haha, I love these. Do you have more? And then it gave me some additional prompts. And again, just having a little bit of fun with it, learning that the technology can do things like this for me is half the battle. Next slide. So I then like, well, what can it do in terms of images? So I asked it to create an image of a snow leopard. We were arguing earlier on our practice session if this was really a snow leopard, because it does seem to have a little bit more color than a snow leopard. But snow leopards, unless they're on white, are not pure white. So it's probably pretty close. Pretty easy graphic. It took me all 2 seconds to type in the phrase and get back something, and I could actually use these if I wanted to. So next slide. So I'm like, well, can it write a song? And so I'm like, well, write a song about a woman who's learning Copilot for a DEG presentation. And we'll leave this up just for a few seconds. On the third line, the chorus, it says, learn to fly one line at a time. Her wings made logic, her spirit will climb. DEG presentation looming ahead. She'll soar through the clouds where dreams are spread. We put nothing about our title. I put nothing about our title, but that totally plays into the flying, learning about Copilot and the flight and all that. I was like, that's really cool. So I think it starts learning the things that you are interested in. Who knows where it went and got that information? Maybe it did, surf the web and see that we had a Copilot presentation coming up. Who knows? But one of the things, and Richard will probably show this, is it starts becoming intuitive on what you're talking about. It's interacting with the prompts you're putting in and starts understanding the direction you're going, which I think is absolutely fascinating. Next slide. So then I ask, how do I set achievable goals at work? So this is going back to my let's learn how to learn, right? So it gave these, and these are things that I totally understand and know. I've been in this business 25 plus years. I understand all these. If I had been asked, just without Copilot, hey, write some achievable goals at work, I would have been like blank sheet of paper for couple hours, probably. I might have gotten a few things down, but it wouldn't have been this quick, right? So this gives you that real, and we've said this over and over again, that jumping off point to developing materials. Next slide. So I'm going to pass it to Richard. Thank you all for joining us for this.
Thank you, Heather. And you said something that I think is key to all of us becoming familiar with Copilot, and that is start using it, get used to it. My live demo is basically that. I had decided that when we booked this presentation, I would do a little experiment with Copilot where I would ask it to create a Copilot deck for presentation. So I am going to stop sharing this slide. This slide is the steps that I will be taking to build a slideshow presentation. I will move all of us off there. I will bring those questions back up, and these are the commands I'll be giving. I'll start up Copilot. So a little background here is I've been in the legal technology business for basically 40 years, and I'm just a real fanboy when it comes to tools to use in a law firm. So I sort of always approach things with an almost morbid curiosity. I just want to know what it can do and what it can't do so that I can assist my users in learning how to use whatever product or whatever tool we are rolling out to them. So let's start by asking it to create
You're
a
not
slide.
sharing yet, Richard.
Oh, thank you. There, share. Can you see my presentation now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay.
Can you go ahead and show how you launched Copilot again?
Yes, I will.
Since others might not be familiar with where it
So
ties
sorry
in.
about that, folks. A little confession here. We did our practice run on Zoom, and we're doing our presentation on Teams, and I'm finding that not everything is in the same place. So please forgive me for these little stumbles I'm experiencing. So here in the Home tab, I have Copilot, and if you're familiar with PowerPoint, you know the designer. It's in the same unnamed group. And a prompt appears, and I can ask it anything I want. In this case, I've asked it to create a slide describing how to use Copilot in PowerPoint. Takes a moment. And here we see our first slide. It suggests that we do an overview of Copilot, activating Copilot in PowerPoint, and how to use Copilot, which is literally what we just did. So I'm going to be slightly more complicated, and I'm going to say create a slide describing the benefits of using Copilot. And
while that's running real quick, Richard, I want to point out that it put notes below in the notes section of PowerPoint for you.
Yeah, let's go back and have a gander at them.
That kind of fascinating.
Yep. It even will recommend what we should say. So here we see some pretty fundamental bullet points, but in the big picture, that's what a slide deck is supposed to be, which is very basic points that we're going to address, we're going to talk about as we do our presentation. I then decided to ask it to tell me what the dangers of using Copilot are. And this request, as I remember, seems to take a little bit longer, and it came back and said, I'm sorry, I'm not able to generate those slides for you. Is there something I can do to help you build your presentation? And I thought this was a very important thing in our general conversations about artificial intelligence. There's all the fears, founded and unfounded, about how artificial intelligence is going to take over the world, is going to take over my job. And my response in those conversations is there are some things that humans can do that artificial intelligence will never be able to do. And when I had this experience of asking it to describe the dangers of Copilot, I realized it can't be self-critical. Being self-critical is an innately human characteristic. So you can't ever expect artificial intelligence to be able to look at it and say, oh, I failed here, I failed there. It's either going to give you nothing or it's going to obfuscate. In this case, it did nothing. I decided to go back to a more general question and asked it to create a slide describing how to use Copilot with Word. Oh, well, isn't that interesting? It thinks that it cannot create that slide. So this is interesting. Just 2 days ago or 3 days ago, we ran through this exact same list of commands, and it created a slide about using Copilot in Word. Now suddenly it cannot. Now I don't know if that's because it's focused on PowerPoint and it's not sure how to switch to a discussion about Word, but that is certainly different than the experience we had just the other day. So I'm going to switch to a different command and ask it to create a cover page for this Copilot presentation.
Couple suggestions in the chat how to reword your prompt. Maybe try Microsoft Word or change width to in.
Let's do that.
There is a little bit of trial and error with these prompts, and sometimes it could be sometimes there's a server thing, like if the connection isn't weird or something's going on there's a lot of activity on the Microsoft server, you might get some weird results.
Oh, and here we go. That's probably exactly what it was, Reanna. The server was probably busy at that time and just couldn't process the request. So again, let's have a conversation about what it's generating. It's generating a true PowerPoint slide deck. It's giving us bullet points that we can discuss as we do our presentation. It's not going to give us one of those PowerPoint presentations that are loaded with text and sentences because it knows innately how to use PowerPoint, and I think that's an important feature. After the creation of each slide, one of the comments it gave me is, if you'd like, Designer also has other layout options to consider. So I decided, well, let's call its bluff. Let's ask Copilot to use the designer to change the design of all the slides and make them, in the hopes of having uniform presentation. Unfortunately, it cannot do this. I have not been able to figure out how to get it to use the PowerPoint tool to take the action it's recommended that I take. So I don't know if there's a different way to ask this, but I thought it was interesting that even though it's suggesting I do this, it can't help me any further than pointing me in the right direction, which, there's an argument to be made that if it can't perform the task, at least it's telling me where to go to find it. I then decided to ask it, well, we're doing individual slides, can it do an entire presentation? And I've asked it to create a presentation about onboarding a new employee, which is a topic that often comes up in the DEG. That's interesting. It just asked me if I want to replace this presentation. When I've done this previously, it has just created a new presentation. It did not ask anything about the existing presentation. And something to remember is that Microsoft is constantly updating Copilot. It's constantly being modified. It's constantly being improved. And because you need to be on the monthly channel, in order to use Copilot, you are going to get monthly updates that might change your experience from one week to the next, depending on what update has been pushed. So what I noticed about this particular experience was that if I was rushing to do a presentation on onboarding a new employee, I would already know everything that I want to cover. I would know the details of every facet of onboarding somebody. And really all I need is the bullet points. And that's what I'm getting here. And depending on our individual ability to present information and our skill level as presenters, one might be able to just use what Copilot generates. As I looked this over, I realized in a pinch, I could definitely go into a meeting about onboarding, or I could go into a meeting of new employees and use this, because the bullet points really do give me what I would be talking about. So I thought it was fascinating that, depending on what my needs were, it could be 100% effective on the first try, or it could be trial and error. Frankly, I've used Copilot in Word to create, to start a document about certain products that we're implementing or looking to support. And generally, when I ask it to do that, it will give me 5 or 6 bullet points, and one of them will be acceptable. But it's better than looking at a blank page. There's nothing more intimidating when you're writing something than staring at a blank page. So does anybody have any suggestion about one more slide or one more presentation we could ask it to provide for us? Just shout it out. Nobody?
I do want to point out, I think there's some folks that aren't convinced, and I don't think that it is the tool to end all tools, but it is important to see that Richard just created this multi-slide PowerPoint in 30 seconds, and it might not be exactly what you want, but putting those images in place, formatting the text, that's going to take you longer than 30 seconds. And now all you have to do is come back and maybe make a few edits. I think that's pretty cool.
I think that I agree with that. I was going to say that's really the asset in terms of PowerPoint, because spending the time looking for those graphics is a huge time suck when you're putting together a presentation like that. And they are continually improving it. They're continually improving the association of words with images that are within their licensing. So you're not using images that are unlicensed in these presentations. Your Copilot license, what your firm subscribes to, is covering all of that. So do we want to address some of the questions that came in?
Yeah. I've just noticed from Rachel Baden, it looks like the slides that you created, Richard, are accessible in terms of font size and color and contrast, which is great. So they're bearing in mind those accessibility things that we've talked about at some of our other meetings. So there are some very interesting comments. So if you can see the chat, please do read it. I won't read them all out, but I think we wanted to talk about pilot groups. How do you identify those people? But I think, Reanna, you said it's really people who you think are enthusiastic about technology. I think that's the case pretty much with any pilot. You want people who are keen and interested, rather than people who are fighting it.
Yeah, and Drew here has said we already have a test group of users in our firm from different work areas that we use for new software or workflows. And I think when you're in an IT group or in a document production department, you know who these users are. We really do know who the technology enthusiasts are, and I would always go to those folks. Reanna, you said here we had a group of attorneys that are curious and excited about all things AI. We have the same thing at our place. So absolutely, on the one hand, you know who the users are. On the other hand, keeping your ear close to the ground during these conversations about artificial intelligence will reveal a number of other people, especially attorneys, who are interested in this.
I think a lot of the vendors are working hard to get the AI tech integrated. In some cases, it is with the Azure tenant, so it's dependent on your Microsoft license. I know that Kira is dependent on that, if anybody's familiar with that product from Latera. But I know that like iManage and NetDocuments, they're all scrambling to make this technology really readily available. So I think that it's kind of like a ball rolling downhill, just picking up steam. And, even from the beginning of this year to now, it's huge how much, conversation there is around AI, and not necessarily specifically about Copilot, but all AI. And it's an exciting time.
Yeah.
The level of improvement just from 1 month ago, 2 months ago, some things that I was trying to do with Copilot and I was like, oh, that doesn't really work. And I tried it again recently and all of a sudden it's improved. They're putting a lot of resources in making those updates.
There's a very good comment here to amuse everyone that questions about whether or not it can copy house styles and house style numbering. And then
hopefully we'll get there.
Jamie just said, no, it doesn't understand numbering, but neither do some lawyers.
That's good.
Which is absolutely right.
One might say that Microsoft Word doesn't understand numbering.
I would encourage everyone to make sure you're familiar with your firm's policy on using AI. You don't want to be in violation. Somebody mentioned that they tell them not to put any client's name or data in. That's kind of where we are with it. So being very cautious about, the data you're putting in, because even though they know it's secure, it's that trust factor, right, for the security people. So definitely follow the policies. Here at Loeb, we have a group that's put together to really investigate AI technologies. It's lawyers and technology people. And so they're constantly looking at it and updating that policy. Yep. And if you don't have a policy, tell your people to get a policy.
Another little FYI.
Use AI to write it.
There is still a slight difference between the desktop version of the tools and the online version of the tools. You'll find a little bit more functionality on the online version of the tools. Not everyone wants to use the online version, so there might be some obstacle there. They are working on getting more parity between the two, and I think they've done a considerable job so far. But just keep that in mind. If you want to really see everything, the online version is going to have the most up-to-date and most feature-rich experience.
So you would recommend that people in a pilot group don't actually put any client names or client data?
Certainly in the Edge version.
Yes, there is a difference, and that goes back to the training. It's very subtle the way that Copilot does it. You have in your web version, there's just a little toggle where you can be toggled to the web, and now you're open to the web, or you can toggle to your M365, your internal environment. So that is a bit of training to make sure that if you're on the web, you're not exposing your data, but there is a secure internal version. And for us, we are not preventing folks from putting client name on the internal side, of course. But I don't think the tool itself is really helpful to expose a lot of sensitive data anyways. When we think about what it's really good at, it's the summarizing and the drafting. So I don't know that there's a use case to give it a lot of sensitive data in the first place. But I think that comes down to your training.
Yep. And Jamie here said Microsoft is advertising it as something where you can throw a simple prompt in and get fantastic results. And as we saw during my demo, and what Jamie goes on to say is, you actually need to consider the prompt in a more structured way with the necessary detail and correct order so that you get the expected results. This often takes more time than just doing the thing yourself, but hopefully it'll improve with time. And I want to say yes. In the 80s, we used to have this term in tech.
You got muted.
I'm wondering why that's been happening to us, just random muting. But in the 80s, we had this term in technology that we called GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. And this still applies here 40 years later. It's like what you ask is going to determine what you get back. So as we saw just by adding the word Microsoft before the word Word in my prompt, I was able to get that slide to generate that didn't generate previously, that had generated a week ago. So I think that's really important for all of us and to show our users that making sure the question we're asking is the correct question to get the answer we're seeking.
Yeah, it is natural language. Sorry, it is natural language, but even like we had to learn how to do Boolean searches and other types. It's a tool, and we have to learn how to use the tool properly. Prompt engineering is becoming a bigger thing, right? We're seeing like prompt engineering roles out there. That's going to be the way to interact with AI and understanding how to deliver the prompt to the tool.
Richard, in our demo
Jamie's
session,
left a very nice link here for some support information from Microsoft. It's in the chat.
Oh,
Microsoft is also coming out with a prompt library where you can save your good prompts and share them with people, so you're getting the best results.
That's good.
Heather, you were saying something?
Yeah, so when we were doing the test, our practice session, we found that if you did a whole new slide and then put the prompt that you got no results for in a blank slide, you actually did get results, because it was looking at the context of your presentation, right? So it wasn't giving you that result because it wasn't within context of your presentation. So putting it in a new presentation, you did get results, which was kind of an interesting thing.
Yeah, and that's something both Heather and Reanna mentioned earlier during their presentations, is that context matters. And as you use it more and more in a single session, it starts to understand your context even more intricately. So, your experimentation will give you a lot of knowledge for your implementation. And what I found is that in my practice sessions and in my research, the longer, when I spent 5 minutes, I got one type of result. It was very pedestrian. But in my research sessions where I spent 30, 45 minutes in the same document or in the same slide deck asking questions and giving prompts, it became more and more sophisticated. It became better at giving me what I was looking for. So I don't know how in the long run it will remember from session to session, or if it will ever remember from session to session. But within my sessions, I started to have more robust experiences as it understood more and more of what I was trying to accomplish.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you, Richard, Heather, and Reanna, very much for a really interesting session. I'm very mindful of the time, and if there's any more questions, we've got a couple more minutes. Please pop them in the chat. Just on the subject of Document Excellence Group, I'd just like to give you another date for your diary, which is October the 16th, which is our 20th anniversary. And we're going to be having a Document Excellence Day in London at Clifford Chance. If you'd like to attend, please get in touch. And also, we will be having an event in New York and hopefully on the West Coast too. So there will be a virtual element. It will be an in-person. It's a bit of a challenge, which we will overcome, won't we, Richard and Heather?
Yes, we will.
But we will be undoubtedly we'll be talking about Copilot. And if you can think how quickly things have moved since it was first introduced, by October, you'll probably be able to just think about what you wanted to say and it will know. So I don't think we need to worry about too much about, it developing into something that's going to be massively powerful, because it's changing on a daily basis.
And in that same vein, if you want to make sure you're getting our comms and knowing what our events are going to be, please sign up at our website. We'll make sure you become a member, and hopefully we'll see you at more of our events between now and October.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.